Hi, welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. Before we get too far into the video, if you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that really helps out my channel a lot. I also love it when you leave a comment. I like to hear what you think about things. My friend John came by the other day and he gave me some more stones, and one of the stones is this beautiful Indonesian opalized wood, meaning it's petrified wood. And it has this gorgeous sort of a teal color to about half of it, and the rest is sort of translucent brownish, but it's got a really neat shape as well as a beautiful color. So I thought I would try to do something fun with that one today. I'm going to make a pendant out of it. I picked out a little tourmaline that is about the closest color I could get to the teal that I had in anything I could find today. So we'll put that with it as an accent stone. We'll see how it turns out. I wanted to thank my patrons over on Patreon. It's my core group of supporters. I have a new patron named Jane H. Thank you for signing up. I really appreciate your support. Just as I appreciate the support of all my previous patrons. You guys not only provide financial support, but also a lot of moral support, and I appreciate that. So thanks for that, all of you. The other group is my YouTube subscribers, and we just passed 11,400 if I remember right. That's amazing and awesome, and I appreciate it. I also appreciate the little financial contributions that you leave for me by buying me a coffee or doing a super thanks. That really helps with the rising costs of materials these days. Also, thank you for the really nice comments. Some of the comments really move me sometimes, so thanks for that. I appreciate it. All right, let's give this a try and see how it goes. Something I'm excited about and I wanted to tell you about is on my merch store, I now have an ebook that I've been working on with a lot of help from my wife. The ebook is a guide to all of the videos that I created for YouTube and Patreon in 2023. It's got a page for each video, which includes a sketch that I drew before I made the project, a picture of the final product, a list of materials you need, some notes that I put about each of the projects to kind of talk about things that were challenging or things that I would change if I was to do it again, stuff like that. A difficulty rating for each one, and finally a live link right to the video itself. Patreon videos, of course, if you want to see those ones, you'll have to have a membership to access those videos. But I'm excited about it. It's for sale on the merch store. You can check it out. There's a link to my store below the video, if I remember right. It's a very useful guide, I think, and if you like to do different projects all the time, I think you'll find that it's an easy way to access a lot of creative ideas. So I think it's something you'll find valuable as far as coming up with projects and knowing what materials to buy and stuff. So download that book and maybe subscribe to my channel as well. So, this is one of my design idea books that you can get in the merch store. I have found in recent years that when I sketch the design out in advance, I generally come up with a better final product. And these books have a great grid in the background, which makes it easier to keep things a little more symmetrical for me. I'm going to show you this amazing color on this stone here. Hopefully you can see that. It's just like an absolute... If you've ever been to the Bahamas and seen some of the water down there, that's kind of what it looks like to me. But it's a beautiful kind of teal, greenish blue color. I find sometimes when I have a just gorgeous stone like this one's not only got a pretty color, but it's got a nice shape to it that's kind of real sinuous and curvy. And so in order to really make that pop, I think it would be best if I didn't do a huge amount of decoration, just kind of something to accentuate the lines and to give it even more of a flowy look to it. So let me show you the tourmaline that I found to go with it. It's kind of got a green-blue color to it. It's not quite perfect, but I think it'll kind of match that pretty well. So I went ahead and I pre-made this bezel. If you want to see how to make an open step bezel the way I do it, I'll put a link up there for it for you. But I will go ahead and make this bezel, and I'm going to do an open back one on this. I have a bail that I made from a previous bail video that I'm going to use since I haven't been sitting around not getting used, and I thought, well, might as well make use of it. It's this sort of a bail that has two holes. It's kind of football shaped from the side, kind of football shaped from the front actually, but that's going to go right there. I think I'm going to use 10 gauge square here, and I'm going to do a little bit of sculpting with the file. Same with this. This is going to be 12 though, so it's a little bit smaller. And I'm going to attach it maybe with some little pieces of 14 gauge square. Not sure. Maybe even 16 gauge square. I want those to be sort of minimal and you can't really see them other than they hold it to the sides. On the inside of the bezel, to make it a step, I'm going to put some 14 gauge square wire soldered to the inside of the bezel. Anything else? Let's see. 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip. I used 28 to make this one. I'm going to use 26 to make this one. It's a little bit thicker. And I did use 18 gauge round to make the step in that one. This little tourmaline is 5x7, and this guy is about, let's see, 43 maybe, 43 millimeters ish, by about, I don't know, 17 at its widest point. Very pretty though. Thank you, John, for such a pretty stone. I hope I do it justice. Alright, so let's make a bezel for that first. That'll be our first step. If you haven't been to my channel before, I use some things that are a little different than some people. I use primarily hard silver sheet solder. I use a spray or dribble-on flux. I'm more of a dribbler these days since somebody gave me a little dropper bottle, which works nicely. My torch is a Silversmith model. It's an aeracetylene torch. It's a great one. I really like it. And let's see, I use a #1 tip on it. So when I'm doing a bezel for something that has some corners here, I don't ever want the end of the bezel to meet at the tip. So I'm going to make it meet somewhere on one of these long sides. In order to do that, let's bend this a little ways down here. I'm going to bend it kind of sharply. I'm going to try and kind of get that angled right. A little bit of manual shaping. It's nice when you have a nice curvy stone like this and it just kind of rolls around it. Okay, so I'm going to use a marker to make a little mark here so I know where to bend it to get a good tight grip there. If you ever need to move a band, you just grab it slightly off center and pinch it. It moves it just a little bit. That looks pretty snug. Okay. As always, I'm going to leave just a skosh of extra for filing purposes. One of the reasons I usually make it angular is so it sits upright easily. So that's why I had to prop this one a little bit. Get back up there. You never want to have too much excess space when you have pointy corners, because you're already going to have to deal with getting the excess top of the bezel to get tightly over the stone. But I think we're within a good size there. We don't have a lot of excess space, so I'm going to call that good. But now we need to cut some pieces of 14 gauge wire to be the inside lip for this to sit on. I'm going to cut it just a little bit long for each side. It's just 2 of those. Something I should remind people, I've done this before, is since you have an asymmetrical stone like this, I need to remember not to accidentally flip this over and solder the lip that I'm going to put in here onto the wrong side, because if I do, I'm going to have to either pull it out of there and redo it right side up or start over. So I don't want to have to do that, so I'm going to try and remember to, in fact, I'm going to make a little mark on the bottom so I remember to make sure to solder it on that side. One time I got a piece, I think it was a bracelet, all the way to the end. I was getting ready to set the stone, and then I looked at it and I was like, oh man, that's not right. So, let's see. I'm going to get these both straight, and then we'll go from there. Might be easier to use the stone as a guide, kind of. That's pretty close. So what if we have this sitting right on top of that? That's pretty good. On this other piece, I think if we can get it soldered at the right angle down here to match this angle right there, we should be pretty good, because then we can just kind of shape it the rest of the way to get it to curve in here. So let's it's honestly almost 90 degrees if you look at it as two straight lines right at the corner. So I think I can get by with probably doing it pretty close to that. Okay. Okay, so I got those soldered together. What I just did was called pick soldering. If you've never seen that done, it's a really efficient way to get solder delivered where you want it pretty precisely. So I'll put a link up there to my pick soldering video if you're interested in learning that. It really kind of elevates your skill levels if you do that. So you can see it's pretty close in there. I think we got the corner all right. I rounded it just a little bit, but I might round it a little bit more with the file. That as sharp as that corner is, it's not sharp. Okay. See, that thing flipped over on me, and then I would have just gone ahead and made it the wrong way. Alright. So I can use the marker kind of to give me some clues as to where I need to bend this just a little bit. I'm going to make a marker. That's about where it starts to bend. You have to be a little careful with square wire. It tries to twist on you when you're bending it. So pretty good so far. It needs to come in a little bit more starting from about right there. pretty good. Now, in order to get a precise place to cut that off, if I color it with marker like that, and then I can use a pick or a T-pin or some other sharp object to make a little scratch through that black. Once this is all tucked where it needs to be, I'll have a better idea then where this is going to connect and everything. Okay, the things that I want to make sure of when I'm soldering this in is that it's sitting at the bottom of the bezel all the way and is relatively flat, so that the stone will have a flat platform to sit on when I set it. So let's see if we can get that soldered in there. Easiest way usually to do this is just to set it on some pieces of solder that are right on the pad. You know, before I do that, I'll make sure everything's sitting down nicely. That's popping out right there. Can't have that. Darn thing. Be popping out on me. Okay. So I think I have some solder right here already I can use. There's one. There's one. This is a pretty sizable bezel, so I'm not going to be skimpy about how much solder I use. I might cut a little bit more. I'm a little clumsy today. Alright, I'm going to flux this and, you know, make sure everything's pushed down, and then we'll set it right on top of those pieces of solder, and then we'll heat the outside and it should draw it up in there. So this is not, the pad is not perfectly flat anymore. And so when this gets hot enough, if some of that doesn't jump up in there like it should, it's because it's not quite in contact with the solder. The solder doesn't really jump gaps. So if you put a little downward pressure so it's touching the solder, I think we got it to go all the way around, but let's double check. So I'm just going to file this bottom flat. I think that'll work. Need to start thinking about our little decorations here. And actually measured with a piece of skinny wire about how long this one needed to be, and this is a piece of 12 gauge square. And for this upper one here, I'm going to use 10 gauge, and then maybe a piece of 14 that comes off, or 12, I'm not sure which yet. So let's see if we can't get this one tapered nicely so it kind of comes to a point up here gradually, and then as widest about here, and then kind of gradually tapers down here a bit. So I'm going to spend some time filing for a while. I got these little finger guards from Pepe Tools, and they do seem to help quite a bit. Because my fingers are mostly trashed all the time. So a lot of my beginner students tell me they just hate filing, but I kind of like filing. I didn't like it at first. It's one of those things where you can see progress pretty quickly and pretty easily. It's always nice to see something doing what you want it to do. I'm going to mark it about in here and cut it off there, and then I can start thinning out that side a little bit. We're getting close. Just have to do a little bit more shaping. That's going to go kind of like that. I'll get that curve to match that just slightly better. And then I'm probably going to take the Dremel with a white abrasive wheel and smooth those file marks out a little bit once I have the shape just to my liking. And then I'm going to solder 3 little pieces. If I can find some 16 gauge square, I'll probably use that to be the projecting pieces that I'll attach to the side of the bezel. But I'm going to get it perfectly shaped and then smoothed out a little bit with the Dremel. So I'll be right back. So I got it a little cleaned up with the Dremel, and I cut some little pieces of 16 gauge square and filed the ends flat. And I took note of where I wanted those to attach. There's going to be 2 on this thing up here. So let's get those soldered on, and then we can cut them off to the correct length. Alright, let's get those realigned. Not like that, so I'm going to do the black marker thing and use a T-pin to scratch it. I'm going to go ahead while it's lined up and make marks where this is supposed to go. Each of them connects. Make it a little bit easier to line it up when I go to solder this together. Okay, so now I can see a little sharp line there through the black ink, and that's where I need to file it to. So I'm going to snip off most of it and then file the rest. Okay, that's pretty close, so I think I'm going to solder that on there. solder if you're over across the Atlantic. One of the things that took me a while to learn was to heat things according to the disparity in mass. So there's quite a bit more mass on this piece over here, so I have to spend a little more time getting that up to the soldering temperature than I do over here. But you still got to get them both up there. So it just takes a little longer for a bigger piece to reach that temperature. It's a bit of a tight squeeze in this little spot here between these guys. I think I got them. Kind of see how we're starting to come together a bit. Okay, I'm going to bend this. Alright, so I think let's solder this bezel on. I'm just going to kind of go right there. So we'll do the same thing we just did. Okay, that appears to be a good connection. So I'm going to let that pickle a little bit. And let's work on filing this piece of 10 gauge square kind of like that. And I'll probably file a little bit of a taper on a piece of 14 gauge or 12. I haven't decided which. But let's start with this one here. So one thing I am going to do in order to get this just slightly wider at the top here is I'm going to flatten it slightly. And flared it a little bit. So I think I'm going to cut it off about right there, clamp it into my miter vise jig, and then I'll file this down to a point. So let's see. Probably couldn't see what I just said. I'm going to cut this off about right here, file that down to a point while holding it in my miter vise jig, and then I will anneal it so it's a little bit softer, and we'll curve it a bit. Hopefully you can see what I've done here. I've shaped that a little bit better and cleaned it up with the Dremel. Got a couple more of those 16 gauge square pieces, and then I took a piece of 12 and I tapered it down. I also narrowed it down this way so that it would fit nicely through this little bail that I have, and that'll be being attached up here after we get this all attached to the rest of the pendant here, which is looking like that. So let's get these soldered on. I filed it out at just a slight angle so it would match up to that nicely. That right there. I'm going to clean everything up here with the rotary tool just to get that all nice before I, make it sort of a tight space to work in. And then we'll pickle it, and then I'll set the stones. So I'll be right back. So I've done a little fine tuning on with the Dremel to make sure everything's all moves nicely and stuff. So let's get this soldered. Last little bit. Let's let that pickle and then we'll clean it up. Okay, so I got the piece all polished up, and I set the tourmaline on the bottom, and so the last thing we're going to do is set this other one. Something I do when I have sharp corners on a stone like this, because that excess bezel is going to get crumpled if you try and push it in too much. If I thin out the very top of the bezel just a tiny bit, that helps with dealing with some of that excess metal there. Get that in there seated well. I'm going to be a little bit careful here, because opals can be delicate. I do this a little differently than some people. Most people use a bezel pusher and a burnishing tool. I just use the side of my chain nose pliers and then the rounded outer edge up here to burnish with. So I'm going to start by just kind of pushing that right up against the stone. In the corners I'm going to kind of go straight over. Like I said, with an opal, it's easy to forget and get a little too aggressive when you're doing this kind of thing, so you need to be a little careful with stones like that. That's why I don't generally buy really expensive opals, because I'm always afraid I'm going to slip a little bit and break one. This is called burnishing, and what I'm doing is I'm just kind of rubbing that top edge. Okay, so that's my finished piece. That's kind of what I was shooting for. I think that turned out really good. I'm super pleased with that. I think that's beautiful, and I hope you do too. I will do a little bit of cleanup on top of the bezels with a polishing wheel, the rotary tool, and a fine polishing wheel, and then I'll get some better pictures and put them at the end. Okay, well, that was the Indonesian petrified wood pendant. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave, and take a few moments to peruse some of my other videos. I have well over 300 now, and there's lots of variety in the content. There's some tutorials, there's some techniques, there's a lot of different art periods that I've kind of tried to replicate. So a lot of cool stuff over there. Check those out. And then maybe consider giving me a subscribe. I'd love to have you as a subscriber. The other thing is, make sure to hit the video description down below. I'll put a link to John's Etsy store where he sells his stones, so maybe you can get some of these pretty stones too. I also have a number of other links. I am an affiliate with Pepe Tools, so check that out. If you click that link and buy something over there, that helps me out as well as Pepe Tools. There's a link to my safety video. There's a whole bunch of different links in the video description down below. I'll put a link to John's Etsy store where you can get stones like the one that I made into a pendant today. I am an affiliate with Pepe Tools now, so there's a link down there. If you click that and buy something over there, that helps me a lot, as well as Pepe Tools. There's a link to a safety video, because safety is important, and then a number of other links to various places. My merch store, where you can get that new sketchbook that covers all of the different videos I did in 2023. It was quite a bit of work, so I think you'll find that it's a useful tool as far as putting together projects for yourself. There's a bunch of other stuff there too as well you should check out. The Buy Me a Coffee link really helps with supplies. You can check out my Patreon if you want to become part of that group over there. And finally, there's a link to my website as well if you want to see what's going on over there. So, all right, well, thanks for watching. Take care. Happy silversmithing.